Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me. I'm saying good afternoon. It's just after 12 p.m. where I am sitting in the Eastern time zone. Some of you may well be here also, and others will be elsewhere in the world. Wow, it's a lovely day here. I'm in Toronto, and I'm going to talk to you for the next 30 minutes or so about how to justify your improvement projects to senior and executive management. I have a cute title for my presentation. It's actually a reference to a TV show. I was watching this TV show last night. In the US, the TV show is called Shark Tank. Everywhere else in the world, the TV show is called Dragon's Den. And I believe there's a Dragon's Den in IT. And the Dragon's Den is what sometimes gets in the way when we try to implement some improvement project. So it always sounds very mysterious, but it's not really. It's pretty, it's a little bit of fun, but it's also hopefully going to give you something you can use when you go back to work in a few minutes. And I've talked about this subject for a few years now, and I do get some nice feedback from people who say they've used the guidance I give, and it's kind of been very helpful to them. They've been able to get quicker approval and more complete approval from the various people who are involved in giving approvals for IT projects. So there you go, a little bit of a self-serving testimonial from me, but hopefully at the end, if you apply some of the practices I talk about here, which aren't too difficult, then you might well have some success too, and I'd love to hear from you if that's the case. So let's move ahead. Hopefully, if anyone's got any questions or comments, you post them in the little Q&A window. I'll keep an eye open for that and make sure I get an opportunity to answer them. 30 minutes. If you've heard me talk before, you'll know, oh, how on earth is Dave going to complete a talk in 30 minutes? It isn't going to be easy because I love to talk. I've got lots of ideas and things I want to share with you, but I'll do the best I can. Okay, here we go. Next up is our agenda slide. And these are the things we're going to talk about. I've got some very dangerous assumptions I've made about you and about ITSM projects. Actually, I'm just being silly. They're not dangerous. In fact, I'm pretty sure I know exactly the type of ITSM projects that cause us problems. But I'm going to make some assumptions about you, and I'll talk about what a good project looks like, and even what maybe a perfect project in terms of success looks like. And we can learn from that, even though many of us probably have never worked on a perfect, no-brainer IT project. But we'll recognize the symptoms. That leads us into, well, what are these critical success factors that we have to address when we're seeking approval? And then I'll tell you how the Dragon's Den, you slay the dragons in the Dragon's Den and get your project approved. In fact, when we get to this point, at number 4 or 5, there's actually a reality check, which could be quite useful to you, because it may well be that your project isn't such a smart project after all. At least you've now got a chance to back away before you go into the Dragon's Den. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Then a last little piece of advice on how to present your proposal. And as I always say at the end, here's what I think you should do next. And I've got some homework for you if you're interested in this subject. There's some things that you can do right after we're finished today, either this afternoon or tomorrow, to help you move forward and apply some of the things I'm going to share with you. Okay. So what do we mean by these assumptions? It's because you feel sometimes like Rodney Dangerfield. We all feel that way when we don't get no respect. We don't get no respect because of the reputation we have in IT sometimes. Sometimes, you know, we're late with projects, we're over budget, we're not able to do exactly what the customer or the user wants. And, you know, there's eye rolling, there's frustration. Maybe we take too long to get things done. The first thing, though, is that bullet number 1 under IT reputation is this is what we can work on. This is what we can improve. Finding out what our business objectives and priorities are. Very famous business guru by the name of Peter Drucker, once introduced this term of managing by objectives to get people focused on the right things. He talked about managing by objectives, having objectives and then focusing your efforts on managing those objectives. Then he said, the problem is 90% of the time we don't know what our objectives are, our business objectives. Well, you know what? I think he coined that term a few years ago, maybe many years ago. I've found in the last couple of years, as I talk to IT people, it's actually not 90% of the time, it's 99.999. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I've only had one person out of the thousands of people I've talked to in the last few years who've been able to tell me clearly and quickly, without looking something up, what their business objectives are. Business objectives tend to be very, very specific around revenue, growth, cost, profitability, maybe the launch of a new product, maybe the introduction of a major strategic resource, like a new system. We're talking about business objectives here, what your business needs, not IT objectives. You then set your IT objectives based on the business objectives. And so problem is in IT, we sometimes work on irrelevant things that don't add a lot of value to the business because we don't keep in mind what our business objectives are. So my assumption about you is that sometimes, you get caught up in the weeds of IT and you don't really think enough about the business. I'm being nice when I say this. I'm not trying to be nasty when I say that, but I think that's what happens often. And we're sometimes a bit slow. We don't define the project very clearly at the beginning. We may be focused a bit too much on technology and we don't think about the business. So guess what people do? Out there in the user business community, they've got other choices now, and they have done for many years. And we call this the consumerization of IT. There's options to get things done, sometimes quicker than we can do internally in IT, sometimes cheaper, sometimes for free, sometimes more reliable, even more secure. A few years ago, we used to talk about outsourcing as a new thing. This has been around for a long, long time now. But in the earlier days of outsourcing, one of the concerns that business and IT people had was that, we lose control, therefore it's less secure and it's more risky. In fact, if you're an outsourcing organization, chances are you have to make sure that your systems are very, very secure. Nothing's perfect, and we all have these breaches and challenges. But oftentimes, someone who's doing this for a living will have a more secure environment than someone who's just built something from scratch internally. So, when we talk about our business users having more choices, sometimes the choices are better than we can provide in IT. And you know what? You have to be very, very good and very reliable at building your IT projects in order to compete with those alternates. So, we've got to be careful. You sometimes feel like, you're Rodney Dangerfield, but there's a reason for that. So find out what your business objectives are. Make sure when we start to do our projects, we understand what the time scale is, how urgent it is that something is done by a specific date. Make sure you understand what the cost is that you've got to work with and the resources that you have, and very clearly understand how the outputs of this project are going to match up with the business objectives. Just keep in mind that the alternates are sometimes very easy and very cheap. So moving along here, here's some familiar projects. I'm sure some of you, if you're working in IT service management right now, have been involved in some of the things on this list. And this isn't obviously a definitive list, it's just some examples. These are all kind of quite familiar. Even if you've not worked on them, you know that they're possible, you know that they happen elsewhere. And sometimes, here's the tricky part. This is why we're talking about this subject today, is the tricky part is how do you show a return on investment for some of these things? How do you justify to your boss that this is worthwhile? Creating a service catalog sounds like a good idea because it kind of supports the business relationship management with the business. But where do you get a return for that? How much does that, it's going to cost you some time and effort and money probably. How does it benefit the business? Implementing a CMDB. In fact, a CMDB is one of the the main projects in IT service management, which actually doesn't have a direct benefit to anything outside of IT. That's really a tool we build for ourselves in order to enable a lot of other processes and activities in ITSM. So how can you show the benefit of that? It's very, very difficult. There is some guidance you can get from, there was an original ITIL book in ITIL version 1, actually I think version 1, version 2. It was called Understanding and Improving IT. And it talked in there, it had a very interesting discussion in there on how you link together projects internally for a team, department, division, business unit, how things enable other things that enable other things which enable the business objectives. And that's where you've got to start thinking about connecting together. You know, creating a service catalog doesn't immediately mean you generate more money for the business. But what it does mean is it saves time and resources, improves efficiencies and delivering of service because we know what the customer's expectations are, and it creates a degree of efficiency which reduces our costs. There's an investment up front, but there's a cost saving, there's expectations set, there's a happier, more stable environment and set of relationships between IT and the business community. And if you can show how they connect together, ultimately, at the end of the day, it allows people out at the front line to sell more insurance policies, build more cars, fly more planes, whatever your business is. So, you know, connecting together the internal nerdy projects that we work on to the business objectives, that's part of the key of what we're working at here. And another way of looking at it is, you know, risk management. I have a cute little diagram here, a little photograph here, which shows, you know, opportunities versus risks. Do you want to go down do you want to build an opportunity and build some positive benefit, or is it risky and you know, is it going to have a negative effect? The sign's cute, but what I prefer to show is like a balanced scale, like the scales of justice, where on the one side you've got an opportunity, and if the opportunity is strong enough and positive and beneficial enough, it will outweigh the risk. So there's a risk that there's always a risk. There's a risk always of anything we do brings some degree of risk. The trick is to figure out, is the risk worth the effort, and will the benefit from the opportunity outweigh the risk? Sometimes we don't put enough thought into risk management in order to figure out that the risk that we're taking, and as I keep saying, there is always a risk, whether the risk is worth the benefits we'll get from the opportunity. And so, you know, another way to think about this is this no-brainer project is really a theoretical concept I made up. There's no such thing as a no-brainer project. If it's a no-brainer, it has to improve business results, it has to save money, or it has to increase revenue. It has to be done quickly and easily with little effort and with absolutely zero risk. That's impossible. Even the best, most closest to no-brainer projects have some risks. See if this is familiar to you. You work on a project and it's time to go live. And of course, often we will go live at a weekend or an evening. The next day we come into work, let's say it's a Monday morning. And if you work in support, you already know where I'm headed here, because the busiest time in support is a Monday morning. The service desk is ringing off the hook every Monday morning because things happen at the weekend. Changes happen. We implement something. Now, a lot of the times, the change that we did didn't work. I say a lot of the time. I mean, sometimes we do something and it doesn't work. We didn't think of it. The coding isn't correct, or the implementation or the dependencies are haven't all been worked out. Okay, that's a project that doesn't deliver the results, and now it's over budget. Now it's not met the time scale, and it's late. But what about those projects that we got done within time, within budget? We did enough testing and we know that they work. And in fact, on Monday morning, when people come into work, they're actually working with a new system or an improved system, which is better than the old one and delivers on all of our expectations. Isn't that a no-brainer project that had no risk? No, there was risk, And sometimes the risk is people come into work on Monday and they're confused, or they haven't been informed, or we didn't get to everybody, or they're still not quite sure because they didn't fully participate in the training and they need help. And that's why the service desk gets those calls. The actual change or the project might be close to fruition. You've got your reviews that you have to do, post-implementation reviews, but you're at the point now where you can still reasonably check off those boxes of being within budget, within time scale, and delivering results, but you're still causing some friction. There's still incidents that get identified and have to be managed through. That's why I say every project has risks. Every project has some failing or some reason why it's short of perfect. So the devil's always in the details here. We can plan away as much as we like, but chances are there's still going to be something that catches us by surprise. Doesn't mean the project was not worth doing. It doesn't mean it was a waste of time. Just means there's further challenges we have to manage through. So, when we say that the devil's in the details, here's a list of questions I'm going to give you, which will begin. There's 3 types of questions I'm going to share with you right now. Whereas if you ask yourself these questions in the planning process, you can save a lot of heartache. They're business questions. There's going to be some finance questions in a second, and there's going to be some IT questions. The business questions really are what focuses on those objectives. What's this project? Why is it important we do it now? What are the risks of doing this, and what are the risks of not doing this? So really, in the world of Professor John Cotter, who teaches us about leading change and how to be good leaders at times of change, we've got to make sure right up front here that we understand that there's a need for something, and the need is urgent. When I say urgent, it doesn't have to be that everything has to be done instantly, but we know the time scales we're working to, and there's a good reason for that. Some of you might remember, if you've been working for a decade or two, that in 1999 there was a huge panic as we were heading to the millennium. The urgency in 1999 for IT systems around the world and IT organizations was quite high. We've got a lot of recoding and fixing up to do and redefining of our data sets here and there in order to account for the 4 bytes of data that we need to start using instead of the 2 bytes of data. Because when we designed systems in the 60s and 70s and 80s, we used 2 bytes to describe the year, thinking that 01 or 00 through to 99 would suffice for the foreseeable future. Well, it did, but once we got to 99, we were suddenly going to reset back to 00 again. We had to use 4 bytes. You know what this Y2K problem was? The urgency in 99 was high, but the urgency in 1990 was not high. We still knew we needed to do something. I remember working in the 90s and talking about Y2K and what it might mean and what we would probably have to do, but nobody did any serious work to prepare for it until it became more urgent. And that's a neat example that I've used for many years to describe what Cotter says as urgency around the vision for the project. So what is this project? How urgent is it? What's the risk of proceeding? What's the risk of not proceeding? And then when you look at something like the finance questions, what's it going to cost? Is it going to generate any revenues? Some projects do, some don't. But, how will this, do we have the budget? Can we afford to do it right now? We might be able to quantify the costs. We might be able to quantify the revenue. Is the difference make it worthwhile? Hopefully we've got a budget which has told us that this is something we were either planning to do or we are able to do. We do have the capability, we do have the funding, etc., to be able to do this. So there are some finance questions you have to ask. And then lastly, there's some IT questions about how are we going to get this done? And how does it relate to other projects we're working on? Is it more important? Does it fall behind something in importance? Is it more important? who's going to get involved in this, who's going to need to be consulted, who's going to do the work, who's going to be consulted, and who's going to be informed. That's part of the what we call the RACI or ARCI matrix in ITSM. IT questions. So pause for a second. We just looked at business questions. We looked at finance questions. And we looked at IT questions. Let's relate this now to the dragons. So enter the dragon. Enter the dragon. Just made that up there. That was a movie, wasn't it? I think that was a movie with, what's his name? Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon. I use the term dragon rather than sharks because when I went looking for pictures of sharks, they mostly look the same, but there's loads of different kinds of dragons. So that green one there is the CEO dragon. The one in the middle there is the CFO dragon, and the one at the bottom is the CIO dragon. That's you running away down in the bottom left there, trying to get away from the CIO dragon. The three dragons. Now, I just talked about business questions, finance questions, IT questions. See how it's all making sense now? There's three people at the top of the executive tree who are responsible for the business, for finance, and for IT. So when you have a clever project like, boss, I think we should create a service catalog, or let's build a CMDB, or let's train all of our staff in DevOps or something. If you go in and see the dragons in their den, I don't know when these three men and women get together, but if ever they got together at lunchtime and you decided to tackle them and you go into the dragon's den, these three people are going to be asking you the questions on the previous 3 pages. And you better be ready to answer those questions. That's the thing I love about the Dragon's Den on TV or the Shark Tank, is you've got those sharks, there's usually about 4 or 5 of them, the dragons, and they ask the same questions every time. Like, we've been watching the TV show for years. We know exactly what questions Kevin Leary's going to ask. He's going to want to know about the value. Why do you want this much money for this much? That values your business at this. Are you nuts? How much have you sold? That doesn't make sense. Forget it. Get out of here. So if you don't come prepared, you're going to get kicked out. And that's what's going to happen here too. Your IT project's going to get immediately rejected if you haven't thought about what's the impact on the business. Is this really a justifiable project? Is it going to give some value to the business? Is it affordable? And are we capable of doing it in terms of IT? And so this is what the CEO, just to be even more labor the point here, the CEO wants to know how are our business objectives going to be met. So if you immediately are able in your proposal, of course, I know you're probably not going to be talking to the CEO, maybe not even the CFO, but even if all you talk to is the CIO or your boss, who might be reporting to the CIO, just keep in mind these principles. Imagine you're talking to these people. If you address all of these issues on this page and the next couple of pages, if you address all of these issues and you address them successfully, how can somebody say no? Now, in your preparation, if you're preparing answers to these questions and you're not able to answer the questions in a compelling way, that's the reality check for yourself. That should be telling you, hold on, Dave, maybe this isn't such a smart idea. It sounded like a cool idea, but maybe, it's not practical. Maybe it isn't addressing enough of our business objectives. Maybe it's going to cost us too much money and we don't have the funds this year. Maybe we have to plan for next year's budget rather than go demand we do it now. So I would say this whole process I'm taking you through here can still be successful even if you never get to go talk to the dragons, even if you never go submit a proposal, because it will stop you in your tracks when you're going off down at a tangent which isn't going to demonstrate enough value. But back to the CEO dragon. Really, this is just focusing on business objectives. The CEO dragon's a focal point, but you might not get to see the CEO. But in your proposal to your boss, you should say, look, remember what our business objectives are? This is how this project can support those, maybe indirectly. So if you don't know what your business objectives are, my first piece of homework for you is go find out. And then link the work that you're doing, even the work you're doing now, never mind next week's project or next year's project, the work you're working on now, link that and do a validation check. Because if you're working on something right now and suddenly you find out that, hold on, it was a cool project, but I don't see where the connection is to the business. And what would our CEO say if she or he heard about this project? Would they be talking to us about why are you wasting your money and your time and your effort on this? So find out those business objectives, make references to them in your proposal, and be specific. With the CFO, you've got to make sure you understand what this is going to cost, how we're going to be better from a financial perspective at the end of this. And again, be specific. Sometimes you can still get projects approved when there's no budget if the argument is compelling enough. We do this all the time. We don't wait 12 months to start something that's a new idea in the middle of the year. We'll do it right away if the benefits are going to be there and they're clearly understood and the risk is low. The CIO really just wants to know, have we got the capability and the resources to do this? Who's going to do the work? Do we have the skills, the tools? How long will it take? How is it going to impact other things? You focus on business, finance, and IT resources, and you can answer these questions and answer them in a positive way. Everyone's going to be on your side. When you come to present your proposal, it's always a good idea to begin by letting people know that you know what the business is trying to do. Then link how your project supports that. It might not be a direct link, but you've got to put some thought into how this enables this, which enables this, which enables those results. So list those out, be specific again. Be realistic about your project plan and do not try to be clever and avoid mentioning anything that's risky. If there's something risky, be honest, because you may still get approval, but you'll be given more resources to deal with that risk. So if the risk is that, I'm not sure if we've got enough time or we've got enough people, but the project overall is valuable enough, or looks to be valuable enough, you might find that your designated leaders, your CIO particularly, may make more resources available. So identify risks, be honest about that. And at the end of your proposal, restate what it is you're doing and why and how it's going to be beneficial. And never forget to ask for approval. I got to tell you, here at Pink, and hopefully none of my coworkers are listening in here. Maybe there are, but I don't know. At Pink, I've had proposals presented to me on my desk before for what we should do. I read through, and this sounds cool, this sounds useful, this sounds like a good idea, it sounds manageable, doesn't sound too risky, and then it kind of stops. And I'm thinking, okay, I think I know where she was headed here. I think I know where he was headed, but I don't get asked the $64,000 question. Can we have your approval to proceed? We would like to begin on Monday or whatever. You've got to make sure you ask that question. It's a thing that we often talk about in sales as well, is you present a solution to a customer, but you don't ask them, okay, are you going to buy now? It's kind of like the last step in the process. You've got to ask for approval to proceed. So remember, just recapping here, executive management wants to know what the business impact is, what the financial impact is, what the IT impact is. That's your CEO dragon, your CFO dragon, and your CIO dragon, or shark if you want. Don't forget, just doing ITSM for the sake of it because you read a book and it explained things really neatly isn't a good reason to do something. You've got to link it to business objectives. It's got to be about continually improving those processes to give us some benefit and some value. Lastly, this is what I want you to do this afternoon, not tomorrow. Go and find out your business objectives. Talk about them with your team. Think about what you're doing now and what you're going to propose to be doing in your next project will enable those objectives. There's no harm in doing a reality check right now on the projects that you're currently working on. And going to your boss and saying, look, we're working on this project, but I'm struggling to see how this is helping us to do, to achieve these business objectives. I've got a colleague here, Troy, who's really smart, loves writing. He's on vacation this week. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't listening in, but he should be on vacation. But Troy's got this blog, and he writes lots of clever articles giving guidance on how to do various things. And he has something here he calls Fit for Purpose ITSM, or how making sure your ITSM processes are fit for purpose. And it gets back to the point I made on my last slide there, previous slide, about not doing things for the sake of doing them. That's called dogma, but doing things because they realize some value and they make things fit for purpose. People tell me that at Pink Elephant, we must have the world's best IT service management organization. Well, we have some good people in IT here who are working efficiently and well, but they don't implement every single process in ITSM. It's just not necessary for us. Our ITSM has to be fit for purpose too. So, work on some of this, think about it. You'll get an email if you sign up here, giving you a link to the recording so you can listen to this again. I know I talk really fast, but you can replay this and skip through it to some interesting bit that you remember from the middle or the end. You can listen to this again, and you can download a copy of the images. I think there's only about 16 slides here. But if you want to have a look at them, you can download those. You'll be getting that soon in the next the next day or two. And by all means, I'd love you to let me know how you get on with these ideas. Is there some success you've had, or particularly if there's a challenge you've had? I'd love to be able to address that next time I talk to people about this subject. So please get in touch. Let me know how things work out. And I appreciate the time that you've given us today. What we talk about here is addressed in a lot of training courses from Pink Elephant, but that's not my job today. If you are interested in learning more precisely how to do some of the stuff here, like communicate with your boss, build project plans, understand which processes are the most valuable, there's tons of information on our website, which I encourage you to go look at, and more of Troy's articles. That's it for me today. I have to get back to my real job, and you'd probably have to do that too. So look forward to connecting with you next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.